So I've come across a lot of people that, this is no exception, but right now there's a lot of people selling. They need capital gains estimates and things like that. So really kind of a twofold question on capital gains. Like, what would you say is the average capital gains? And then we're talking about as a foreigner. Maybe if you want to, you can get into the Mexican, but I want to focus on the foreigner. And another thing is permanent residency. How does that change capital gains?
Okay. As a general rule of thumb, you're looking at around 32% of tax, foreigner or national. There's really no difference as far as the tax treatment goes. It just depends also on the ability to offset certain things to reduce your tax base. So under Article 1 of the Mexican Constitution, both foreigners and nationals are afforded the same rights. And with that, it basically means that if you have a residential dwelling, which is something important to point out, it doesn't matter if you're a foreigner, if you have a tourist visa, if you are a permanent resident, if you're a Mexican national, you will have the same tax base, and you have a tax break up to 700,000 US. It's indexed, so every year that is also inflation based. So if you have a residential dwelling that is up to 700,000 US, that means that amount of the value of the property, you're going to pay zero taxes because it is a residential dwelling. You basically have to declare that is your abode, your place of dwelling, and that is the amount of money. Anything north of that, you get taxed. I might be wrong on the numbers because I know, but it's around 700K, but let's say it might be a little bit less. But generally, it doesn't matter if you're a foreigner or a national, you still get that tax credit because of it being a residential piece of property. The drawback is that you can only use that exception once every 2 years. So you can't claim to have your residence and do several transfers in a year. You get that for your actual place of residence, and you're good for 2 years. So once the 2 years are up and you didn't claim that benefit, then you're good to go on. If you're speccing on a house or things like that, you still get that credit because obviously there are certain things that need to be in place to afford this tax credit. You have to have utility bills in your name, like a landline, like electric, gas, so that you have the ability to prove to the notary public, because remember, the notary public is charged under law to calculate the taxes, to obviously inform the parties
Receive
of the
them
amount,
too, right?
and receive them and pay them. Right? So it's a function that the Mexican government pawns off on the notaries without any type of remuneration. You basically do that as a notary as part of the territory, but you're doing that free of charge as far as that exercise of taxes, because if you're a national, Mexican national, or you're a foreigner, you still get those items withheld, and the notary turns around and pays the Mexican IRS SAT the tax that is corresponding. So it doesn't have there is basically that ability for foreigners to use the tax credit and also to show that this is my place, this is my documentation. But it really doesn't matter, again, if you are a Mexican national or a
permanent resident,
residence, or
doesn't matter at all.
To tourist visa. It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
The only thing that matters is the tax break if you have a residential dwelling. And if you don't, well, now obviously you're going to be taxed at the general rate, which is around that 32-ish%, depending on the deductions that you have. There are several things that can be deducted. There are certain things you can do to help your base. As far as that, there's obviously exchange rate considerations. There's also the ability to say, well, I did these improvements, but the improvements have to be done and documented
Factura.
in a very specific way. And not only the factura, the barcoded official invoices, but also the construction license. And there is a value attached to that construction license. And then the manifestation with the Land Tax Records Office, Catastro, there's another number there as far as the manifestación. Basically, it means that there was once a raw tract of land, and then you improved on it with a construction. And that has a value. And so you have those two values. Your third value is going to come in at the termination of works notice, which is where you basically have the ability to say, okay, I estimated in my construction license my value to be 200,000 US. And it turns out that the construction came up to 250, 300,000 K US. What happens is the termination of works notice has that also value, and then you can have that little bit of leeway. But if you have those three documents in place and you have those proper values across the board, then you have the ability to say, okay, I purchased my land at X. That's a documented value at your escritura, at your title deed level. And then you went in and improved on the specific lot. And if you have those documents in place, great. Because that actually is much more important than your facturas, than your official invoices. Yeah. Because again, it's like, okay, I paid my appliances and my furniture. Yeah, but those things really are not dispositive as far as calculating the amount of taxes. So yeah, capital gains is tricky, but it's not it's not rocket science. But yeah, you do have the ability to simply use that either as a national or as a foreigner.
Okay, we said we're going to keep these short. I already got 3 follow-up questions. One, does it have to be for at least a year to get that 700K? And once again, we're not holding you to that. It fluctuates year by year, but do you have to own the property for more than a year? But let's just say you buy it pre-construction, you sell it 9 months after you take delivery. Are you still eligible for that?
Yeah, the only drawback is that you can't use that same exception within the next 2 years once you use it. So yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to be there for X amount of time. It's like, hey, this is where I am. So yeah.
Next question. Most people that I talk to that have done renovations, especially like Americans here, they do not have. They're like, hey, and they're like, it shows like a little receipt or like a.
Yeah,
so basically most people that are doing that, I would say that at least half of them don't have it documented correct to write it off.
Yeah, because
but when you have all this stuff, you can actually lower that capital gains tax significantly, right? Okay.
Yeah, simply because you have the ability to offset the full amount of the improvement, because you have the ability to document the construction process of that. And it works for not only residential but also commercial buildings like small hotels. Like if you're doing a renovation, you go into the municipality and say, hey, I need a construction license. Okay, what are the amount of, or the extent of the renovations? Okay, X. You're going to pay duties or rights over the amount that you estimate. That's where people sometimes think, okay, I'm going to save on paying less duties because I'm going to reflect a very low ball number in my renovation. But it turns out that when you do come to a point of sale down the road, it's not going to work, right? You need a higher number. Yeah. And that's why it makes all the sense in the world to actually say, okay, this is a real remodel at a very certain price point and an expense point, and you simply have the ability to use the construction value license on that, and then you go in the manifestation and do that part, which is separate office. One is the public works office, which is the one in charge with like urban planning, and you get the construction license from that office, and it's the same one to do the termination of works notice. Basically, you inform the authorities, hey, I finished. There's an inspection process. There's a person that comes in and inspects, hey, okay, there is 3 bedrooms, check. 3 bathrooms, check. These are the finishings, and there's some pictures taken, so that it's not just, hey, I did 5 bedrooms, and okay, where is the documented walkthrough of that part? And that's it's not going to be the dispositive value, but it's going to be one of those 3 values that it's going to determine your base. And that way, the notary, when it calculates the taxes, you have that. Okay, I bought land at X, I had these improvements at Y, and Z. This is your tax amount.
Okay, and the last one, I'm curious. I have a client. I won't name him, but he's Mexican. Okay. Well-off guy. Has property all over Mexico. And I think he was referring to a property, might have been in like Chihuahua or something. But he got a capital gains estimate, and he was basically calling Baja out, and he was like, oh, this is bull. Back in like Chihuahua, like we're only paying like, 6% or whatever it was, And he was basically saying that like Baja, since it was like so foreigner based, that like taxes. Anyway, I'm just curious, from state to state, Does that change the capital gains tax?
Well, no, because it's a federal regulation, so
Okay, so
it's the same tax
It's more
code
maybe people
across
are finding
the states. Yeah.
quote unquote, whether legal or not, loopholes.
Yeah. There's certain things that people get to be a little bit more creative than they should,
Okay. Yeah.
and do that. But yeah, it doesn't.
figured that.
It doesn't. It doesn't change because of that being federal. There are certain state taxes, but not income tax. That's a different.
I'll have to send this one to. Can't name him, but I will
Okay,
send it to him.
Sure.